All right, everyone, it's time for us to begin. My wife and my mom are in the front row now. Ooh. I don't know who's in trouble, me or them. We are on lesson 8. The lesson that we're covering today is still discipline. We talked on Wednesday quite a bit about corporal discipline. We're going to broaden it out a little bit to talk about some other elements of discipline and some ways that parents can discipline their children. And I just really want this class to be a class where we're all sharing our ideas. We're letting others know what we did well. Everybody here probably did some things well, and sometimes we didn't do some things so well. And so it's helpful to share those ups and downs with other people so that they can learn from our mistakes. I mean, we always talk about to our kids, wisdom is the ability to learn from other people's mistakes. But if no one ever shares their mistakes with other people and how they've not managed things well, then we don't have that to share. We don't have that to get better at. So neither one of them are here. They're usually here in this class. But I was in the back during the Lord's Supper. Oh, here she comes. And Ryan and Carrie Ann had to take their little one out. And part of me felt with them for having to do that. And then part of me just had a smile on my face thinking, I sure do love those two. You know, that they're doing what God wants them to do. They're working hard at it. And you can see sometimes just how difficult it is, how exhausting it is, how stressful it is, how challenging it is to bring your young ones to services on a regular basis. And the road ahead when your kids are 1 and 3, somewhere in there, can seem overwhelming. What is going to lie ahead of us for the next 18 to 20 years. And so what this class hopefully is designed to do is to give people like them and like the McKibbins and others who are here in the class, who still have young ones, some practical, hands-on advice from people who have succeeded and failed in our endeavors to raise our children. Now, obviously, the Bible is the key. God's Word is always key, and we start there, but we go from there to sharing our practical wisdom and instruction with others. So if you need a lesson 8, Jason has those. You can go ahead and raise your hand. He can get one of those to you. Lesson 8, and then we'll start lesson 9 on Wednesday. So what I'm going to do, just keep your hand raised. Jason will be the only one that will not be able to bow and pray. If you have your hand raised, he's going to get you one. That's fine too. But we're going to go ahead and pray. And specifically, we're going to try to spend just maybe a few extra seconds praying for the parents who still have children under their wings at home. So let's bow. God, we thank you for being a perfect Father. We thank you for making 0 mistakes. We thank you for seeing every single need that we have, knowing how to solve those needs, and being there to help us every single step of the way. We are so grateful, Lord, for our children. We're so grateful for the blessing that they are to us in our life. We thank you that you have blessed this congregation recently with a bunch of kids, and we're grateful for that. As we start our class out this morning, we want to say a special prayer for them. Lord, these classes on the side are filled with kids, and most of their parents are in this room. So we pray your special sense of guidance, comfort to the parents, to let them know that you're with them and that we're here too to help them along the way. Help them to, even though when they're tired, even though when they feel like this is overwhelming, help them to understand. Just take a deep breath and understand that you are helping them. And if they follow your word, and if they seek counsel and advice from other godly parents, that it will be okay. And that you will bless them, and that you will help them. Help them impart godly instruction to their children. Please, Lord, help and bless the hearts of the kids who are in this building today, that their hearts will be open to your word, that they will not have rebellious and stubborn hearts, but they will have receptive hearts. And help the parents cultivate those hearts in a way that brings you honor and brings you glory. Lord, help those of us who have raised our children, that we will continue to try to influence them and help them see the correct way to live. That through our example, they will see that following you is the only way to live this life. Be with the grandparents, that the grandparents will know their role in helping their children and their grandchildren and those who are fortunate enough to help their great-grandchildren. We love you. We thank you again for being such a wonderful Father. Through Jesus' name, amen. All right, so we've talked a little bit about this in this lesson, and we've looked at this idea that punishment is a form of discipline, but not all discipline is punishment. Sometimes punishment is made just to stop a certain bad behavior. It is an important part of discipline, but if that's all we do and that's all we think about discipline, our kids are going to be in trouble because we have a lot of instructing and guiding and helping them along the way that we have to keep going on. So this is what we've covered already in our class. The one thing that, I cannot read that, my eyes are not good enough. So discipline is an expression of love. Discipline proves you belong to the family. Discipline isn't pleasant in the moment. Discipline has a purpose, and discipline is a form of training. And then the goals that we looked at through Scripture. The goals of discipline are to produce wisdom in our children, to protect them from harm, to remove foolishness from their hearts. It says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of correction will drive it far from him. Teach obedience. That's what the form of discipline is. Bring delight and peace. Proverbs 29:17 says, correct your son, and he will give you rest. Yes, he will give delight to your soul. And we looked at the opposite of that is if you don't correct your son, you don't correct your daughter, they're not going to give you rest. They're going to give you a lot of turmoil. They're going to give themselves a lot of turmoil, and they're going to give everybody around them a lot of turmoil. So it's very important that we do that. We looked at discussion question number 1 already. So let's look at section number 2, which talks about the types of discipline. In Ephesians chapter 6, it says, bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. So this idea of training means instruction, discipline, education. Admonish means to warn, counsel, and to give verbal correction. Much of our discipline happens through teaching, not correction. Most of our discipline, training, happens through teaching, not correction. Because if you teach them properly and they have a heart to listen to you, how much is that going to diminish the amount of correction you have to do? Now, every kid is going to have to be corrected. As adults, we have to be corrected. But if the training is correct, if the training is consistent over time and it starts young, they're going to make less mistakes than they would if there's no training involved. They're left to raise themselves. So I just want to share with you one example in my life of my dad, who gave some training one day, and I was way beyond the age of getting a spanking. I was probably 16, 17 years old. And the way that we worked, the landscaping that we did is different than what Bobby does. We went into subdivisions that they built houses, no yard. We leveled out their yard. We put grass in mostly. That's about all we did. But as you did that, Dad would drive around the tractor most of the day, and the rest of us would rake along the houses and the sidewalks and the driveways that sort of blended into what he was doing with the tractor. And in the high school, I was probably working. My mom could attest to this if you ask her later. Probably 50, 60 hours a week a lot of times. And there was a particular time where Dad would work 3 to 11 at the mill. And then he would start working at like 6 in the morning at the landscaping business. He worked all day. Dad worked from like 6 in the morning until 11 o'clock at night. But when he left at like 2 to go to the mill, he would leave me and whoever else was working with us to finish up whatever job it was. So for some reason, I don't know if it rained that night, I don't remember this detail, but for some reason, I wasn't supposed to work that day. I was going to be able to sleep in. All right, this is great. I was going to be able to sleep in. Not so fast. Early in the morning, probably around 7 o'clock, knock on the door. Get up. We're working rain last night. We can't work, whatever the case may be. Get up. Takes me in the car. Takes me over to the job site. And he's like, you see that pile of dirt and rocks on the road? You should not have left that there. That makes the whole job look terrible. Look at the sidewalks. The sidewalks were not swept properly. The yard might grow and look perfect tomorrow, but today, all people are going to see is the rocks in the street and the dirt on the sidewalks. When you do a job, you have to make sure you pay attention to all the details and you get it done completely. That's a lesson. That's something that he did to teach me. Now, it was because of a mistake, but hopefully to avoid making that same mistake in the future. So it's very, very important that we give our kids those kind of things. So the second type that we have up here is this verbal correction and rebuke. Proverbs 29:15 says, the rod and rebuke give wisdom. But a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. Rebuke means to correct with words, which includes pointing out wrong behavior, explaining why that wrong behavior is wrong, warning of consequences, calling them to repent, change. You can't do this. That's all verbal type of consequences or verbal type of instruction. The third is a loss of privileges, consequences and loss of privileges. Corporal punishment isn't the only kind of punishment. I think it is a God-given way of doing it, but there's nothing wrong. For a while, there was a lot of pushback on timeouts. There's nothing wrong with, grounding your kid, sending your kid to his room, whatever the case may be. Whatever works for that kid. Somebody was telling us, I think it was Tim, that one of his kids, spankings didn't work very well. It was the loss of privileges or being sent to their room that was the worst thing ever because they didn't want to be stuck in their room. I was one of my oldest son's baseball coach when he was young. He had a daughter that was older than our kids, his boy, my boy. We were playing baseball together. And he was having a hard time with her. And what he did is he took every single thing out of her bedroom. I think he left a mattress on the floor and a Bible. That was it. That's all that she had. I mean, she didn't have access to any kind of TV or internet, or she didn't have a chair to sit on. She didn't have a dresser to put her clothes in anymore. She had nothing. And he's like, I just can't get through to her. Everything I'm trying, it just doesn't work. And so there are those type of occasions that happen when you'll have a kid that's different from all your other kids, and the form of discipline that you're trying with that kid, the form of instruction, is not working. Plus, I mean, how many of us have experienced the difference between boys and girls accepting instruction, being still enough to listen to instructions? So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to be more creative in how you give that kid instruction. They're not going to sit on the couch or across the table and listen to your instruction, but they may listen to your instruction while you're in a fishing boat. Or they may listen to your instruction while you're driving into the car. They may listen to your instruction while you're shooting baskets with them. They may listen to your instruction while you're playing catch with them. So those are the everyday moments when they don't realize they're listening to instruction necessarily, and because the instruction is being passed along with something that they're enjoying doing at the time. And that is one of the greatest ways to learn, when you're not realizing you're learning, when you're just engaged in life. You know, the Bible teaches to talk about when they're riding in the car, when they're driving. The Bible doesn't teach about riding in the car and driving. When you're walking by the path, when you're getting up in the morning and in the evening, just all kinds of different ideas. You can make them do extra chores. I remember, this wasn't me, it was my dad again. But I had two cousins that were twins that were like 2.5 months younger than me. And they moved up to live with us for a while. And one of them did something. I don't even know what he did. But my dad had him, because my mom and dad had to do a lot of help raising these two. And so he made him basically move an entire dump truck load of dirt from one spot to the other spot for no apparent reason. I mean, the dirt did not need to be moved. It was fine where it was, but the lesson needed to be learned. And so that was the punishment at the time. You're going to take that whole load of dirt and you're going to move it from there to there with a wheelbarrow, and to teach a different kind of behavior. And so making restitution, if they break something, if they do some kind of physical damage to something, then hey, you got to pay for that. You did it. You did something you weren't supposed to do. You broke it. You pay for it. Now, again, I think Tim pointed out again, spilling the milk is not a bad thing, right? I mean, it's an accident. Breaking a window can be an accident. But breaking the window can also be an act of disobedience. If you were told not to throw the ball towards the house and you did it anyway, you could do that. If you were told to, don't throw the ball in the house and you threw the ball in the house anyway, the punishment isn't because you broke something. What's the punishment? Why are you punishing? Because something got broken? You're punishing because they didn't do what they were told to do. So whether they break anything or not, if they're not doing what they're told to do, or they're doing something they're not supposed to do, that punishment needs to be there either way. Does that make sense? So sometimes we punish based upon if they broke something or not. Well, they're not learning the right lesson there. There's no ramifications unless I break something. And what in the world is every single kid who's ever lived on the face of the earth going to think about themselves when they're throwing the ball in the house? We won't break anything, I throw perfectly, and my brother catches perfectly. I mean, that's just what they're going to think. Remember, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. They think things that are not true, and that's what we thought when we were that age probably. So type 4 is the physical discipline we talked about for quite a while. I think we need to read these verses. He who spares his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him promptly. We've talked about that a little bit last time. The only real reason, and Savannah's not here, but the reason we would delay punishment is because we're not ready to punish effectively. Okay? We're upset. We're going to punish out of anger. And so we need the chance to cool down. If we're able to punish immediately and that not be done out of anger, then that's better. That's what this verse teaches. It says, he who spares his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him promptly. Proverbs 22:15, foolishness is bound up in the child, for the rod of correction will drive it far from him. 23:13-14, do not withhold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod, he will not die. You shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. Now, we also noted, Mike brought up, there is, and we talked about this, there's a huge difference in what you use to discipline your children in a physical way, and what would be inappropriate. Most of us don't like the idea of slapping. That's not the way that it's good to slap someone in the face. That maybe carries it from an emotion, just a natural reaction instead of a thought-out, reasoned approach. And you need to think that. Now, Tim had a good point after class, and I feel comfortable calling on Tim on the spot, put him on the spot. He's not uncomfortable on being put on the spot, I don't think. Tell us a little bit about. Somebody bring the microphone up to Tim. And you can clarify this if I'm wrong. I don't believe Tim used his hand to spank with, and he had a reason not to do that. Now, any advice that you hear here is not law, okay? It is you just listen to it and you take it the way you want to take it and apply it to your life and your situation, because we don't know those situations exactly. But I like this. I think it makes a good point. Go ahead, Tim.
We didn't really have this in our head at the time. We learned this as we went.
Okay.
It evolved. It started out with a simple thing. We read about a rod in the Bible, so we chose it. It could have been a spoon. It could have been anything. But disciplining that way and not using the hand, at one point, I don't think he would mind either. My son, he's a little guy too, and he's going to get, a spanking with this rod, and he gets very, very upset and angry. And he's just gritting his teeth, and I said, are you angry at me? And he goes, no, I'm angry at that rod. And he didn't connect what I was doing with something to be angry at me. And, it hit me when he said that. I'm going, oh, that's probably why this is a good idea, the way it connects back to the child and everything. And I was going through some bumpy stuff a couple of years ago. And he could see this. He came to me and he says, I just want to tell you something. He says, I never felt unloved in your home. And there's a lesson in all this. The amount of times that we had to spank our children was when they were very little. It ends very soon. You have to trust God on this. And while I got the mic, because you had the slide, when you train your child, you can train your child to do a lot of things. But the Shema tells us, and it's talking about loving the Lord their God with all their mind, with all their soul, in Deuteronomy 6. And that's the one when, it doesn't say they're driving a car, but they are on the road in that verse, Dwayne. It's like, when you're on the road, when you're doing these things, you teach your child that. You're training your child to love God is the objective. So you center everything around that. What am I getting ready to do here? And how is this going to impact this child to love God?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked a little bit about that. That's one of the foundation principles we talked about. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and teach them to love their neighbor as themselves. So if you teach them those things, you're going to be a lot better off. But I just love that example that Tim gave as far as Wayne did not connect his anger at his dad, but at the rod that he was using to correct him. And I thought that was interesting. The other thing that Tim said that I think is a huge success is if you raise your children and they live in your home and they can always say, you know what? Every single minute of my life I knew I was loved. Because how many kids can't say that? How many kids can't say that every minute of their life they knew they were loved? So if we're showering our kids with love, that leaves a foundation where even when we're disciplining them, in a harsh way, to them it seems harsh, they know that it is done out of love. And they may not recognize that in the moment, and it might take a little time to look back at that. It might take them having a kid or two to look back at that and say, you know what? All those things that we went through and all those trials that I put you through and everything, I never felt you didn't love me. I knew you were frustrated with me. I knew you were aggravated with me, but I never felt unloved. And so that is a key part of all of this. So a couple other things about the rod here that we did not cover is that it is never to be done in anger. You don't punish in anger. You punish to correct. And so if you need to control your anger for a few minutes, that's fine. It should be age appropriate. We talked a little bit about that. At some point, your kids are above the age where you're going to use a rod. You're going to have to use some other form of discipline to get through them. It should cause discomfort but not injure. It is paired with instruction. Always paired with instruction. And I love the examples you guys gave in class on Wednesday night. You were talking about some of the maybe the spankings that you got as a child, but one of the things you always brought up, the spanking and the communication, the instruction had to go hand to hand. It was like the instruction ended up being the most important thing, and the corporal punishment or the rod ended up just being the explanation point to the instruction. And I think Alexa brought that out very well with lying, right? So the instruction, the thing that stuck was the instruction, don't lie. But what helped that stick was the whatever discipline that went along with that. And so that's an important part of it. It should always be followed by restoration. And a lot of people talked about that too. I learned forgiveness when I was disciplined as a child. I learned that my parents could be frustrated with me, they could discipline me, and they could wrap their arms around me and love me right after that was over. Right after we had, I'm sorry, Dad, I'm sorry, Dad, I'm sorry, whatever the case may be. So they learned, hey, my parents, when I make mistakes, my parents handle that, but they don't hold it against me. They still love me. They still embrace me. And that is like the first way they're going to learn about God's grace and God's forgiveness, if that's mirrored in the way that you discipline them. So I think that's a very, very important part of that. And then it's not the only form of punishment. There are many other forms of punishment other than the rod. So let's go to this next question. So I have 3 things down here. I don't think I've had all these in your outline. So you can answer any of the 3 things that you give. How do you distinguish between biblical discipline and abuse? I think we talked a little bit about that. The anger is a huge part of that. What you use to discipline with. If you're just using the closest thing to you, you look at something that might cause pain and you just grab it and start, it's probably not the best idea. That's why a lot of you have a particular thing you use to discipline, and you have a particular place you put it. Tim was talking about this again after services were over on the refrigerator. And so whenever they had company, when kids tend to misbehave, all they had to do is walk over to the refrigerator and just move it a little bit. Good behavior happened like that. I told you my mom had a switch in the pew in front of her, and all she had to do is raise my pant leg up a little bit or reach for that switch, and I changed my behavior immediately. But what that does is it stops you from grabbing a shoe or a random stick or some household item that you weren't planning on using, that you hadn't thought it out. So I think that would be one of the characteristics we do. So anybody, raise your hand. You want to share anything on these other things here? We have Savannah, and we have Chris over here. Chris?
So between discipline and abuse, I think one of the biggest distinguishments to me is that with abuse, there's not a precedent set for the behavior that was expected. Whereas with discipline, you have that precedence, and the discipline follows that precedence. And so a lot of times abuse is reactive, or it should not come as a surprise or something that it's not fair when someone's punished and they didn't understand the rules to begin with.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Savannah?
I haven't quite looked it up myself, but I've heard that according to CPA, the Child Protective Services, if your child has a mark, they can put something against you, like a bruise or a welt. So if you were to use something that doesn't cause such marks, like I like using a fly swatter because it stings really bad, but it doesn't actually leave a mark.
Yeah, so I mean that is I think one of the things. If you're not leaving welts or permanent marks on your children at all, if it's a red mark, that's different. It's going to be. We already have Joe up here. Somebody else, somebody who's lived through this and maybe on the back side of this.
I think we had written down when Susan and I did this, abuse is punishment with no training.
Okay.
You're just, and I think another thing, it makes you feel good. And conversely, when you're looking at biblical discipline, there is training of some sort, whatever that situation, whatever the kid is and stuff like that. And in the end, the child should learn from it. There should be a benefit. It's like Tim was saying, maybe it won't be today, maybe it won't be tomorrow, maybe it'll be when they have children. But the benefit needs to come from the child because they were doing something that was not correct or in the wrong direction or whatever, and they will in time do something correct. That's what they need. So if you feel good about picking up the shoe or whatever it is and just letting your kid have it, that's got to be even abuse, even if you're not leaving marks and stuff, because it's for the wrong reason. It's to make you feel good because you're frustrated. And I think we can all look in the mirror and say, maybe I did that once or twice or whatever, because we're human beings, we're parents. And so I think that's, at least for Susan and I, those were some of the things that we talked about.
All right, very good. So somebody else raise your hand. We got Phil over here. We got Randy up here.
Was there somebody else over there?
Nope, you're up, Phil.
Okay. The second one, disciplining in public when they misbehave. That's a tricky one today. It's a lot harder today than it was when I was raising kids. We would take the kids at the restaurant. We would tell them, look, if you don't stay seated and you don't stay quiet, we're going to have to go to the bathroom. And they knew what that meant because we'd tell them before we walked in. So we'd take them to the bathroom, and my wife would usually take them in there. She'd flush, make noise, so people wouldn't hear it. And she tried to do it when nobody was in the bathroom, but if they were and she needed to take care of it, she'd make noise with the water so they wouldn't hear it. Because she was aware that when you discipline a child, it should be a very private thing, not something you put on display.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
It's humiliation to them.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the. Yeah, I think that's a great point. When you discipline a child, it's between you and them and God. Nobody else has to know about it.
That's right.
Nobody else has to witness it.
Yeah.
And that's something that a parent has to deal with.
Another thing on this discipline thing, it's two-sided. There's the parent has to deal with their anger, and the child has to deal with their anger. Mm-hmm. They're two separate issues because they come from two different places. A child may be angry for a lot of reasons. Maybe they're not getting enough attention from their parents. They're too busy. When the dad says, "I'm too busy, go away," it can create anger in a child. And so that they're going to act out in that way. Now, I want to say this. If you're disciplining your children right, they're going to not want to be angry at you. So if you find out a way, if I had a situation in middle school when I was a kid, and I was on the basketball team, and one of the kids after practice came up to me and tried to get me to engage in a fight with another player on the team. And I said, "Look, I don't want to do that." But I said, if he's going to confront me, I'm not going to back down. So we got into the locker room. I confronted this guy and said, "Look, this guy told me you wanted to talk to me or you wanted to fight or whatever." And I was so mad that I knew it was a lie. He was trying to get me, my goat, to engage. And just before I got ready to swing and make the first punch, my dad walks into the locker room. And I went, instead of from 0 to 60, I went from 60 to 0. And I say that to say this, that when I kept the picture of my dad in my mind, if I'd kept it in my mind, he wouldn't have had to open that door for me to see him. But if we raise our kids in such a way that we capture their hearts and that they know that their parents really love them deeply, and there's no rejection of any kind, and there's no disappointment, and real disappointment as long as you love them. When you really love them, you're never really disappointed. You just have to take the time to recorrect. And when you have that, I think it solves a lot of the discipline problem on the parent side, because the child doesn't really want to do. Normally, a child does not want to do that.
We might talk about this on Wednesday, but I think children. I don't know what's going on here. Are sort of predisposed to love their parents. God created it that way. And so if there is this sense of love, and that's the basis for everything, most kids, they're all going to have their moments, some more moments than others, but their desire is to love their parents and for their parents to love them. I think that's built in by God. And so if you love them and they know that all the time, some of this other stuff, the specifics, that's just the key. That's like the foundation, and a lot of the specifics are going to be different. Randy?
Yeah, kind of like you said about the switch. I remember one time we went to visit my grandparents in Chattanooga, and as we were about to leave, we were around the car. My little brother and I started jumping around and carrying on like kids will. And my dad he told us a couple times to stop it. We didn't. So he just casually walked over to the privet hedge, cut a switch, and across the backs of those little bare legs, it had an amazing calming effect. And, when I think about discipline, two things I can see that distinguish it. One, it's not harsher than it needs to be, and it stops when you get the point across.
Okay, very good.
Those two things.
Very good. All right, very good. Appreciate that. All right, Matt has something real quick, and then we'll...
Bill, I'm not fussing at you or your dad, Randy, but you said you were cutting up like little boys will, and I don't know the exact situation, but I think we have to be very, very careful not to correct or discipline normal behavior just because it's annoying to us, and probably did way too much of that. it's hard. It's slow. The correct correction. If it's too easy and too quick, you might want to pause. You're going to have to take time, and especially little boys have a lot of energy, and there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe there's a way that they can get that energy out in a better way. But just because someone's being mildly annoying or inconvenient is not necessarily a good idea you might not need correction. Maybe you say, hey, can you take that over here? Or we're trying to talk, can go outside with that. You guys, I can see you got a lot of energy. Let's focus that. But again, I don't know that particular situation, but that's something I think that we have to be very careful about. Taking a moment and pausing and thinking, is this really a problem? Or is it a problem for me in the moment? Does that make sense?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, we don't punish because our kids are aggravating us, or remember we talked about this. Some kids are naturally going to get along better with than others. And sometimes God puts a child into our life that we don't understand and we don't get. And almost a lot of what they do is frustrating, all right? It's just frustrating because it's just not how we think, how we operate. And so you don't do it based upon just normal behavior, right? Now, you might have to take what is considered normal behavior and through time modify that. Yeah. Some of that's they're going to grow out of some of that.
Gently,
but
slowly,
yes,
patiently.
Yes. I think all those are very
Not
good
just
points.
cut it out and smack them like, no.
No. I want to say this before we get to Bobby and Mary. So here's some key distinctions. Discipline is controlled and purposeful, done for a child's good. Abuse is done in anger, causes harm, and is about the parent's emotion, not the child's training. Always emphasize that God calls us to be self-controlled, not explosive. I made that point last time, that if your kids don't learn self-control or self-discipline, they will be controlled or disciplined by someone their whole life. And so a thing that you have to teach your children is, and that's part of the work ethic, right? Teach them to get their work done. That's why when they're going through school, try to teach them. They might have a hard time concentrating, but if they don't learn to figure that thing out at some point, or a job that allows them to do differently, it's going to be a struggle for them. Not just while they're a child, it's going to be a struggle for them while they're an adult. So you want to make sure that some of the normal behavior, if they don't grow out of it, that's going to be a lifetime hindrance to them. And you also have to, you have to be like a psychologist, psychiatrist as a parent too, because you have to understand what is driving that behavior, okay? So for one kid, what's driving it might be just total rebellion. For another kid that's driving it might be something that they don't know how to handle or deal with at that particular point in their life. And you have to figure that out. We're talking about, one of our lessons is what happens when kids rebel or parents fail. But one of the challenges is knowing those things. That's so hard because you're not trained in that. What is anxiety in a kid? What does that look like? You didn't have anxiety. You don't know. What does, certain other elements, what does that look like? And some of the times they look alike. The symptom, the behavior looks the same, but what's motivating that behavior can be totally different. One might need fast corrective action. The other is going to take a lot longer. And, maybe visits the doctors and help and all that good stuff. And so it's hard to sort of know the difference between that, especially if your kid's so much different than you and you just don't relate to them. Does that make sense? I think we're definitely on the same page. It's just a matter of figuring that out. And that's the hard part, because you have two kids totally different and they do the same thing. One shouldn't be doing it, and one, it might be okay for now that they're doing it, and until we can do something different. All right, Bobby.
Yeah, along the lines of self-control, I think, and kind of to Matthew's point, and I totally agree with Matthew, I think that our level of peace and serenity and patience within our own hearts and minds, I think, really guides how we discipline our children. And if we're stressed out all the time or emotionally overwhelmed, or we haven't been doing what we need to do for God in our own minds and hearts, I think we're not in a place sometimes to discipline very well because we're emotionally just in a place where everything bothers us all the time.
Yeah.
And we're frazzled. And I'm guilty of that. And I work from the house and I have to just walk downstairs and I'm in the zone. And sometimes I have to be careful. I have to let that stuff go. And I think sometimes with me and Meg, it's about, hey, I'm in a place where I need to step back. I need you to take care of this. And I also think that it's just so important to be in a place of peace. And that's, I think, the struggle as a parent. And I found with my own kids, changing diapers is different than getting into teenage years. It's a totally different emotional, what you need to be emotionally there and listen and what they're saying. Can't be all in your head all the time. And I struggle with that. That's a hard thing for me.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah, we talked about some of that. If we have to make sure that we're not disciplined because we had a bad day, because we're stressed out, and because this, like as Matt pointed out, this is just aggravating me in the moment. You know, sometimes kids are just have energy, and you don't want them to have energy. You want them to be quiet because you don't have energy, and so it's a challenge. Mary?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Matthew's point about redirection, you know, just telling the kids, well, if you can't stand still out here, you're going to need to go in the house because this is dangerous. But also, I see parents whose children are just chaotic and out of control because the parent is really, you know, thinking about all that stuff so much that there's no discipline. I mean, yes, we can demand things sometimes in inappropriate ways, but reasonably prompt obedience to a command is a value too. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even if the parent hasn't, I mean, there's a big thing now today about how boys have energy. And, you know, I only had one boy, and I think when you have two boys, it's a whole different proposition because they set one another off. But yeah, you know, to hear, oh, boys need energy, and then they're running all around your house and climbing on your furniture when the family comes over, you know, there's an appropriate place for energy. And as Matthew said, you know, if you redirect to another area, that's appropriate. But so yeah, you do have to be very discerning about the situation and your own heart.
And it's
definitely.
not easy. It's not easy.
Not easy.
It's challenging because all the kids are different. Every situation is different. So one thing that if they've been told not to jump on the furniture, it doesn't matter how much energy they have, they shouldn't be jumping on the furniture. And if they've been told multiple times, then that might be the case. Well, they really need another form of discipline here because the instruction's not working. And so they need to be able to learn, if I have this much energy, I should go somewhere else instead of jumping up and down on the couch, because jumping up on the couch is something that mom and dad said not to do. So I know I can't do that. So what can I do now? And that it's going to take a while because kids don't think like grown-ups, right? They think like kids. But it is an important concept. So, all right, fathers, we're not supposed to provoke our children to wrath. We are not to discourage our children. Can we over-discipline to the point of discouraging? Can we over-discipline to the point of causing them to be angry or provoking them to wrath? Yes, we can do that. So we have to be very careful about that. So here are a couple things that we need to go to. How can parents provoke their children to wrath? Harsh, angry, excessive discipline. Unfair or inconsistent rules. Showing favoritism to one child over another. Of course, we've talked about this. That's going to look different in their eyes and our eyes. Treating every child the same by definition is unfair. So we're going to have to figure out how we can treat the kids differently without coming across as unfair. We shouldn't give one of them a coat of many colors and the rest of them not a coat of many colors, right? We know that doesn't work. But there could be discipline. It's going to look different, and the child's not going to get it. Every child in the world has probably said that's not fair at some point in their life. So if you're a parent, you think you're going to avoid that one, good luck. Never. When we're never praising, we're only criticizing. That's very bad. Unrealistic expectations. I think that's some of the things we talked about. Matt talked about those. Don't discipline in public. No public humiliation. Take them to the bathroom, whatever the case may be. Or, well, I think it's appropriate to say, we're going to leave the store right now, and we're going to go home. And we're going to come back to the store, and we take care of it, and then we go back to the store. And that takes a lot of time, right? It's better to just get it over with right now, but and we can't do that in our society. Using the right words, affirm their character, not just behavior. Catch them while doing right. All right? Secretly catch them doing something good, and talk to them about how wonderful and great that was. Speak words of praise. Tell them why you're so proud of them. Tell them why Christ is so proud of them. Spend quality time. Invest in the relationship, whatever that is. And you know what? You're going to have to learn to do things. You go ahead and hit the button. You're going to have to learn to do some things that your kids like and you don't. And that's just the way it is. You probably maybe had to do that with your spouse, so you're going to have to do it with your kids. Some of your kids are going to like sports that you don't like. Some of your kids are going to like camping, and camping is the worst thing in the world for you. You can't even imagine how bad this is. And maybe you can just have your spouse do the camping and you not do the camping, right? Or whatever the case may be. But you're going to have to do some things you don't really like. Show physical affection to your children. Hug your children. Pat them on the back. Give them good eye contact. Listen to them. Let them talk. Listen to what they have to say, because that helps us. I mean, I wasn't really good at this. My mom was really good at this with my kids. I'm not saying she wasn't good at this with us, but she has that grandmother's approach with my oldest son. They'll talk about the craziest, stupidest stuff in the whole world. When he was a kid, he'd call my mom and talk to her for hours. And Shelley and I'd be like, what are they talking about? And it's just dumb stuff. I mean, it's just stuff that I don't have the mental capacity to listen to. My mom's older. Maybe has less to do than me, and so she was a great person to be able to do that. And so I think that's going to be good for this lesson. Our next lesson is going to do some more general principles, and I put a little paragraph at the beginning to let you know. I really want Wednesday night to almost be like a boom, 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 boom. One person has a microphone, next person has a microphone, next person has a microphone, and you guys share your thoughts with us. Thank you.